Hi, Nalin. Welcome to the Factors.ai podcast. This is Sri Krishna here. I'm one of the founders and CEO at Factors.ai. Very happy to have you here. We have been following your journey for quite some time. We had been interacting over LinkedIn and on Zoom calls over the last couple of months. But your journey, both as an entrepreneur, as a techie, becoming a sales guy, and also the first and then second startup, is something which is really amazing. And we really want to share that with the rest of our audience apart from your startup on Storylane. So welcome here. To just
Yeah,
get started, if you can just talk about yourself, your journey into US, and also your past and education, this thing, it will be really great for us to start with.
absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Sri and Factors. Pleasure to connect with you all. So yeah, it's been a great journey. So I'll start a little bit like I know a few things you asked about. So one is like in the whole entrepreneurial journey itself, how it started. So it kind of started when I moved to US. So this was like at least 12, 13 years back actually in 2009. So when I moved to the US and after, I'm primarily by trade an engineer or a researcher. So being background more on machine learning and computer vision, that's how I started my career itself. But when I came here, I was very deeply involved in tech and I wanted to be. I was in Amazon for a while. Once you are in a big company for a year, I came here, and the reason why I moved itself is like to be with the startups and come here, right? So the constraint was once you went into the Amazon, it's like it felt like it was too slow. The bureaucracy and everything. So I couldn't stay for more than a year and a half or so, and then I left them. And one challenge that I had was like because when you move as an immigrant here is the visas. So we always have these visa constraint where you can't start something in US. Hope it's getting better, but
It's
12
getting
years
really
back
good.
it was yeah, 12 years back it was very challenging. So what I did was I had to find someone who could start company and I can join him, right? This is the whole thinking. But I knew I had to do something. I can't be waiting for 10 years to get my visa and not do anything. So the one thing I did was like start first to join a smaller company to learn about this, and then I felt like I was the first engineer after the founder. Joined a company called DACRI. It's an AR glasses, very deep tech, but building augmented reality glasses. Spent around 6 years. So the key was like I found a US citizen who was actually could start a company, and he started and he hired me. Right. So then we didn't have funding, but the key for getting the visa workaround was that, right? Have somebody to run it and then joined it. So it was a big risk at that time as well, because on a visa, if you're on, you have to go back. But I was
Yes.
willing to do that at that time because
I think
I
it still
just,
happens. I don't think it has
it still
changed.
happens. It hasn't changed at all. But part is like you can't wait for 10 years, right? The time's running. So I want to be involved in that. So there was a workaround, but I don't, it's risk with a smaller company with two people and one person running it, another person in a H1B visa. It's even the risk is very pronounced in terms of running it. But those risks were, finally paid off in terms of learning more about startups. So Dakri was great for 5, 6 years building AR glasses, very deep tech. And then we
Oh,
spent good amount of time. So this is way back in time. Like today, Apple is launching AR glasses, right? This is like 10 years back we started it and that. And good, right? We built the company around like we were 200, 300 people, great tech, a lot of great people hired in the Bay Area. So it was good run. But again, the product market fit was a problem because it was way early in time, great tech, everything, but people are just not ready for it, right? So it's like when smartphones came, they took them 4, 5 years and boom. And then now suddenly you have this kind of tech. It's too
yes.
hard for them to take it. And we were very
And
focused on
AR
industries as
glasses
well.
and VR glasses are actually very a great range in the last 6 months or even 9 months in this thing. But maybe it was 6 years back, or how many years
Yeah.
back was this?
It was like I think 6, 7 years back in the VR stuff, and AR is still very in an infancy. You look at like Apple being launching like next year, right? And then when a big player makes a move like that, then people start learning about it. So this was like again, since it was too early, it was too hard for people to understand those concepts. And this kind of started right after, if you remember, Google Glasses launched. That was in 2010, and that's basically what the hype was around, and that's basically what we felt like, hey, what's the next generation of Google Glass? And that's what resulted in this factory. But again, going back to it was great. And then I have spent 5, 6 years. I was very much tech person at that point. 5, 6 years. I was the CTO there and leading the team, engineering, and a lot of deep tech. Then after that, didn't go well, right? So after 5 years, I left because I knew it wasn't going great, and the company did close after like 7 years after it started. Great learning because you go through it, you hire, the first you hire 250 people, and then you have to let go 250 people because you didn't do, because then the amount of learning is massive there, right? In terms of hiring, building the team, understanding. One thing I really learned is from then onwards is tech is like great, right? From this is my personal learning. Like I need to be involved in things which I didn't control for the company to go down, which is product market fit, sales, business side, right? And then I realized tech is something I do well. So put that in the back burner, things that you know well. Start focusing on things we don't do, we don't know, right? That was that first learning, right? After that, I focus very less on tech. Tech, I know I can solve it. Then it starts becoming more like things I am not aware of. How do we learn about that? So then, I mean, that's the time for SaaS also was evolving a lot, right? And this was around like, as you can see even today, like there's SaaS companies every day, right? And the SaaS is how the future would be. And after the deep tech there, so I met my co-founder Akash because we met through, because our kids were going to the common school and we met
Nice.
them. Yeah, that's how we met. And then I was very passionate about like next, like I knew this is the Dakri wasn't doing the right thing, but I was very keen on picking up something which I know that I can create an impact through product, not just through tech, and I can run with it and create a path for us to grow faster. So Akash was my co-founder. He started the company, and then it was Kinderlime. It was a SaaS company in the early education market. And I met him, and then I said, I'll jump again. I'm on a visa, right? I need someone. So he was the only person who started. He had citizenship, so he started the company. So I joined him, and then I took another chance, and then started building this product more like what is the best version of the product that we can showcase. Because if you look at early education market in this Kinderline space, basically like it's very outdated. So they need a better tech. They need a better way of like how to better manage the schools, how to better connect the schools with parents. So it was good 2 years, 3 years, and then we rebuilt the product and completely ground up. And then we expanded very quickly to large schools within the US. And that led to a bigger player who's been in this space for 30 years to come in and acquire us. So then we did sell the company at that point. And during that journey within Kinlime after the Dakri, I focused very less on tech. And the learning is to learn a lot about the product, make sure the product market fit exists, and we're able to sell in a repeatable way. That's when a lot of selling happened. I mean, like in my head, I'm thinking like selling to people, showing demos, showing products. And we are talking about like what are the pain points they're solving. Of course, we did the traditional way of doing how B2B selling had been happening like 6 years back. Then we felt like after the exit, we felt like, hey, what's next, right? And then we, as an entrepreneur, we were like, okay, what's next? What do we do next? And one of the pain points that we had, we looked at our journey and said like, the sales and selling for these people who are not that savvy and they wanted to experience and feel the product. And we felt like we didn't have a best way to show it. What we did during those times was created a mock of demos and sent it, and that worked. At that time, we didn't think we need to build this. We just created a mock in a kind of like lookalike, and it felt like that worked. So after that, we felt like, hey, why not we turn this into like a way to present for every B2B company so that they can present the product. This is not our pain point that we went through in the previous company. I'm sure this is what everybody's saying. So we went around, started talking to a lot of people, like at least hundreds of people we spoke after them for like few months, me and my co-founder Akash. So again, Storylane, we started together again. So we started talking and everybody had pain points around this. I mean, we started dwelling around like from a sales perspective initially, more like in sales perspective in the sense like, because we talked to sales and how do you present the product, how do you demonstrate it? And slowly we started understanding the pain point is not just within sales, it's even like when they come and visit your website in the marketing and even during onboarding. And so we started understanding like there is a depth and breadth around these areas itself quickly. And that's kind of resulted and like we started narrowing it down after talking to initial design partners and resulted in building Storylane at that point.
Awesome. That's a amazing story. One thing which just struck me, I mean, as an engineer, there are a lot more predictability. You know what you control, you know what's the kind of output. Yes, of course, things can go wrong. There are always bugs and other things, but there is a certain controllability around outcome. Sales and product market fit or what market does as such is a lot of randomness. You have a lot of input, but the output is something which you can't convert, and there are a lot of ambiguity in terms of how things can work. How was the mental shift for you, right, from having being a core engineer versus to a also learning into customer success, sales, demos, closures, product market fit, etc.?
No, it's little hard to switch off from your engineering and tech. I still very much tech, right? It's by trade you are, right? Even today, like if there is anything around tech, I will be the first person to jump in. But you need to be constantly aware this is not something that you need to be doing more and more. It is challenging, and I think the biggest challenge for me was like during the Dakri when I said like 6 years, like towards the end, we know it wasn't doing well, but I already shifted mentally. Like tech wasn't there. Like when we were winding down the company at that point because I've learned I was deeply involved in tech. At some point, when as an executive at that time, like tech is not something I should focus on because the company isn't doing well at that point. So you kind of mentally started going in that direction. This was during those last year within that decade before we closed it. So that was the number one where I learned more about it. And then definitely when I shifted into the Kindle M SaaS as a started selling, then I understand the nuances of the people psychology, people learning, talking to them, understanding the product UX experience, how it matters, all the little things, and finally how do you support. And then the biggest value was I felt like when a product you build and give it to somebody and is used by, I mean, the product like Nalin was used by millions of children, millions of parents use it. So the impact right away was like when you build something and is used by people, that impact was huge. Then all the tech that I built, I felt like I built 5 years of tech and nobody used it. And then now I built something quickly and a million people were able to use it and see a value. Then I was like, you start understanding the shift in your mindset starts happening, right? Immediately you felt like tech is great unless it's not useful. It just doesn't go anywhere.
The
That's what it
value
was.
of the product market fit or value of directly being usable or having that
Exactly.
impact for a particular set of users.
So it opens up your mind suddenly, right? And then after that, there is no going back in some ways.
No, that's really valuable for one early stage startup founders, especially a lot of them from India, because it's like we are fundamentally engineers and engineering is something has a lot of thing going into our DNA, but understanding difference between what you are passionate about to what is actually useful or what is something which is immediately needed for a set of clients or set of customers or set of prospects who are willing to pay money for that is very, very important.
Exactly.
aspect.
I say this, I mean, to people who talk to me about like product market fit, how do you evaluate it, right? In the YC. I mean, like one thing I would say, I mean, yes, we went to YC also when in Storylane.
Oh,
So one of the
nice.
things in the YC, they teach a lot about it is like, build something that people want, right? And like people find out like, how do you measure those things, right? How do you know build something people want? I think I mentioned like two things, right? Very important. We should always look for is like, what do people value? People value is like time and money, right? People don't have time. They don't want to give time and the money. So if you can find time from people to give you feedback about what you're building, then something you're building is valuable. Number one. Second, after some time you ask them the money and they're ready to swipe your credit card, then you ticked off the most important two things that people can think about. Then you really have hit your nail, right? I mean, you are able to hit a product market fit. So if you're able to do this repeatedly for a few times, then in a simple way you can start breaking it down. So that's basically the model that you start thinking after that, like after the diary, like this is how we need to operate. That's how it is.
Got it. In terms of your first startup and you bootstrapped, you built with Akash, your co-founder, then you sold off as well and this thing, and then you sing. What were the, and now Storylane has also been a couple of years. So what was the mind shift? How, I mean, it was Darky is also almost like you had been a startup founder and then the second one had a profitable exit and other this thing, then the third one. What were the shift in the last two startups for you?
So the main shift is that actually we raised a lot of capital, and then it was around I think close to 200 million was the capital because it's a hardware plus software and it's a deep tech. And this was when the capital was easy. I mean, even now it's easy, but that time it was still 200 million. 7, 8 years back is a lot of money, and we raised that capital. So one thing we realized is like very capital efficiency became clear after that, right? It's just no point like raising capital if you don't know exactly where you're executing. And yes, Kindle was just the angels and then more bootstrapped at that point. And then we learned a lot about like understanding how not to spend and how to be frugal around it and trying to, in a good way, right? In a good way, because now you want to, it's not like you want to be profitable, but in the sense like you want to be able to strike that burn zero and also make sure like you are able to sustain yourself. Because at the end of the day in the startup, like you need to be persistent, you need to play a long game as well. So making sure it's not growth at all costs. I mean, a lot of people are realizing it today as well, but growth at all costs just doesn't work, right? So that was a big learning at that point. And kind of similar model we're applying when we moved. I mean, this is something that comes as you learn, right? We trade like in Kinline now in Storylane as well. So we did raise a seed, but again, we are being doing pretty well. But at the same time, we know how to be very efficient throughout the process. And that's something that we've been doing too.
Got it. And in this case, also, I think you would have gone through this process. I mean, from raising a lot of money to being bootstrapped to then starting up again and also learning to be frugal. Why YC? What was the, why did
Yeah.
you, I mean, it's like, I mean, you have gone through the kind of like lot of
Yes.
VCs, then gone through a bootstrap startup, which has gone to an exit, which is great. And the next time you have actually started up with YC, because generally people
Yeah.
start with YC
Yeah.
scale up a lot of money, and then they go to bootstrap. So there has been a kind of like a change in cycle. What triggered that, or what is the thought process on that?
So YC, I mean, YC happened by, in some ways, an accident. So we were not thinking about like YC till the last 5 hours before application. And I ended up meeting in a call with one of through the network call, a friend. And then he mentioned, like, I was trying to be a design partner, trying to pitch about what we're going to build at Storylane. He mentioned, like, hey, YC deadline is today. Did you apply? So I was like, no, I felt like there's no need because we've learned a lot over the 8, 9 years, gone through down, and we built the company. We felt like we probably what we learned from YC, it's totally fine. But he was very clear, like, you will see something which you haven't seen. And I felt like, okay, let's apply it. And we did get into it. This was like quickly made in 2 hours before the deadline. We just submitted it. And since we got to it, and I will tell you, it was not, we didn't think too much when you applied to YC. We just, somebody told us, like, okay, let's apply. Once we got in, we were debating whether we should go or not, take it or not, because we're not sure whether it's worth it or not and everything. So we started talking to a few other people, YCs, whether, like, to make the decision once we got in, whether to accept or not. And what we heard a lot of feedback is like YC has been like, everybody is like amazing, you have to try it out and everything. So from our perspective, we felt like we've learned a lot of things. What will YC give? So we felt like, okay, since this is one other big thing that attracted towards us was like, it's like getting into the best colleges, universities. There's a network of people around it. We felt like, so, like, I'm always going to be an entrepreneur. So in that case, this network of people is very important, so that I can tap into not just today, but even in the future, right? I didn't think about like Storylane. I'm thinking about my like next 20 years, 30 years, right? And the companies. So then we felt like this brand and having that presence will be useful. So that led us to convince ourselves, okay, let's go in. But after getting in, I completely will tell you, YC is like a gold, right? So I think there are a lot of learnings you have as a founder, but that's great. But first time, or even if you're second time, I highly encourage to go through it, because it's the vibe, the group, and how they start breaking down the simple ways to nail down like what you need to do to be successful is very critical. And that's been exceptional for us, definitely, through the program itself. So that was the reason why we went. And overall we felt like, hey, next 20, 30 years, this is going to be useful for me. That's all.
That's nice. And which year was this YC batch? Okay.
2021, we went in 2021. So that
This
was like,
was online, or did you have that offline
it
experience
was
as well?
online. I think
Okay.
offline would have been even better experience, but we definitely enjoyed even the online experience. I mean, people got very quickly adapted to this remote work at that time with the COVID.
Mhm.
And YC did a great job conducting it online as well. So always on, plugged in, connected, listening in. And in some ways it helped also, because like we didn't have to be in person always. Sometimes we could just connect from wherever we were and doing the work. So pros and cons, but it definitely worked out. It was all online. And
Mhm.
when we applied, when we got in, we didn't have any product whatsoever. We were just like, like we just had like some
Searching.
designs at that point talking. So once
Mhm.
we got in, it put some seriousness right away into us. Like, okay, at the end of the day, there is a YC demo day. We need to have a product. So we started building the product quickly at that point, like after getting people. So that's in a lot of ways that helped us to get out
Mhm.
quickly, build the product in 3 months, 4 months, and prototype
Got
it.
it. And I mean, of course, 2021 was the peak years as
Yeah.
such. And the YC startups, or startups which come out of the YC demo day and all, are generally super valued and other the thing. And you have been a second time, almost third time entrepreneur there and other the thing. You would have had a lot of VC pressure, right? A lot of people saying like, okay, take money and other the thing. How did you decide to like, okay, yes, YC is good, but I would build the product and bootstrap and then build around that?
Yes, and I think YC, once we got into YC at that point, we felt like, we didn't even actually think about capital at that point, because some of the learnings comes from, like, as I said, the previous company being bootstrapped, your mindset kind of like nails down to like, not to be bootstrapped, but at least the mindset clearly things like, it's not like capital, you don't want to go take the capital right away, because you need to make sure the product is clear and what you're building is clear, and you're able to nail down with few first 5 customers. Until you do that, I just don't feel comfortable taking your money. Right? It's like you're loaning someone,
Okay.
you have to give it back, right? That's your thinking, and you start building it. So we want to make sure like we can generate things through it. So that's why the capital part, even though it came through it, but we just didn't feel like excited like right away, like we need to take any capital. And the YC, we didn't go from a capital perspective. YC we went because
Got it.
we felt like it's a lifelong experience for the next 30 years to build, and next more companies we build or where we get to, and the network is very important. So that's the reason why we went through YC itself. And after the YC, once we built the product, when we came out of YC, we didn't have any customers again. So we were not like, we were still telling a story. Until we don't get a customer, you're telling a story, right? At that point.
Got it.
And behind, I mean, like we know, being like second time, third time entrepreneur, it's not like story. It's actually the validation that's important. So in our mind, it's always about like going and validating first, always
Mhm.
thinking that. So subconsciously, you just prioritize that. That's how it is.
I mean, I think that's actually a unique perspective. Most of the first time entrepreneurs or others look at story, what is your positioning, what is the market gap, time, and other this thing. But on the other hand, a second time or a third time entrepreneur, you're looking at like what is the validation you are getting. I might have
Yes.
a product, I might not this thing, and then you are building it. Then that's one part. Of course, YC,
Yeah.
I'll come back to the story of how you actually scaled up into customers and this thing. But if you can also share what does Storylane do
Yeah.
and how does it get started and what clear problem does it solve for customers? Who are your ICP customers? Who do you want to sell to and how you came over building it? That will be really great.
Definitely. So Storylane is a product demo platform. So we sell to B2B companies, SaaS companies. So our primarily our go-to-market is on marketing teams and GTM teams, marketing and sales teams. The way you look at it is like today, I mean, the problem that it solves is, SaaS B2B buying has been like continues to grow and it's not a linear path in which people buy today. So people come to your websites, engage, and then it's better practice, right? They engage, they go through the different mediums, they go through social validations, and at the end of the day, they want to view your product, interact with the product, see what your product does. The journey for a buyer starts like today more and more like the most important thing of all of this is product, right? They come to your website, read your books, read blogs around it, but the most important is about the product. They need to see the product, and companies need to embrace that more and more and show the product more faster so that they can capture the audience quickly and more qualified way. And as they go down in the pipeline, right, I mean, sales teams needs to show the best version of their product quickly. So what we have seen is like the challenges companies have is like they're not able to showcase the product, and that's what the buyers want. Businesses sell the way they think people need to buy, but buyers come thinking completely in a different way, right? That they want to see the product, they want to be assisted during the process to buying. So the mentality and the approach has been shifting. So what we help companies is like, what is the best way you can showcase your product to attract your prospects, right? Either from a leads that you capture to them, or once they come through it, how do you use that information to show the best version of your product during your sales process as they go through your funnel, so that you are getting more engaging, demos to these buyers, and then so they convert. So that's basically where we're solving it, so that we're changing how B2B buying is happening, and that shift has been happening for the last few years easily. And we the shift happens from other mediums, but we are mostly focused around like how best to demonstrate products, because that's what the buyers come for. The most important thing is product. Yeah.
Okay. No, just to think a little more from a fundamental level. I mean, you have website. We used to have snapshots of product on the website. You used
Mhm.
to have some case studies. You used to have something like these are the use cases of using the product and taking you through the product. Showing the demo of the product on the website seems obvious. I mean, it's like, why do you have to separately sign up for a call or just see a sample, just images of the product? Why
Yeah.
don't you show the full demo of the product? Seems obvious. Why? But this hadn't happened 7 years back.
Yeah.
2015, 2016, we didn't see much of those companies. We saw a lot of those companies emerging in the last couple of years. We had Reprise, DemoStack, Navatech, Storylane, a couple of others like Demo Boost and other this thing, quite a few other companies in this thing. Why now versus 6, 7 years back? I mean, that
Sure.
any
So
insight on that?
I think the I mean, few reasons, right, why it's
Mhm.
happening more and more now. I think partly, there was this remote selling happened during the COVID pandemic.
COVID times.
That
Okay.
definitely accelerated in terms of how the enterprise selling has to happen, right? People
Mhm.
used to be like, more the enterprise selling used to be like, hey, come over, go to the visit, and there's a lot of business visits, and they mix it up, and then they try to engage in person actions happen in terms of enterprise sales. Once that got cut down, so the enterprise deals need to happen pretty quickly, like the remote way. And remotely, you can't do a lot of these things, and automatically, like, I think, in my opinion, that accelerated a lot of these companies to come through it. And in terms of like, what is the best way, and because people want to see the products, and how do you enable the champions remotely, and that's basically what resulted in more of like set of these companies and everybody to come up. And that's one reason where it happened faster. But going back to 6 7 years back, why it didn't happen? And I think it's because like the mentality of B2B buying has been slowly shifting. The Gen Z's of buyers have been changing, right? In the last 10 years, when you look at it, like people demand more like a B2C kind of an experience in a B2B world today. This didn't happen. I mean, even for the matter, PLG it's not been like 8 years back. It was like there was maybe one poster child, right? So now you have like more PLG advocates everywhere in terms of what is the best way to drive. And the subscription economy has been constantly changing that way. So all that has helped, and COVID has definitely accelerated. So combining all of this, then the mentality of B2B buyers has been like more and more like once they see this is the better way, then they want everywhere this way, right? And that is accelerating even further.
That's amazing. Actually, I think when suddenly trends pop up,
Yeah.
right, and it's like matter of multiple things. There is somewhat like shift from offline sales or like kind of on the feed sales where people will do a contact, do a meeting, or do events or do outside shows and other this thing, which for various reasons moved totally to digital. Second, the market also trending where like from Gen Z, where like you want to see something rather than having that long shot demo and discovery call. Another thing, I just want to see something. I mean,
Yeah.
pricing is, I want to see you my pricing, but I also want to see the product before I actually talk to a person. I can talk to a person to learn more, but before that, I want to see. And also the couple of out of market factors, which is something like COVID. Nobody expects how this thing happens, and all of those things coming together, and
Yeah.
you being in the middle. Did it something like when you were starting off with Storylane? Did you see any other companies which were doing it, or you were one of the early pioneers and other things which started on this?
We actually, when we started the company, we actually didn't know some of these people existed. I mean, there's more like definitely we've heard, we definitely knew one of them, all of them about it. Again, they were all very early at that time, less than a year at that point. So now, I mean, all of these companies have been recent, new ones, right?
Hmm.
And as we went along those during the journeys, we did learn more about other folks as well. But again, we from our premise, we started thinking like what we learned, right? I mean, from our previous company, and we were trying to solve through it, and we went through the process. But I would definitely recommend, like, just because of the trend, not to repeat what others are doing, definitely, and finding a niche around that and understanding the pain point fully by talking to customers is very important eventually, like exactly. And so yeah, so that's how it worked out for us. And one thing I would also highlight in this terms of the company's B2B buyers journeys that's starting out, right? So as you can see in this B2B space, when the buyer behavior is changing, like you mentioned, pricing, everything, it's not to get rid of salespeople during this journey, because I think people buyers want to still talk to more like a, think of it like a sales assistant or product specialist, right? They don't want to have, I mean, what definitely you will see is they don't want to have like this meaningless conversation just to talk about pricing, or just to talk to me like what your product will do, discovery kind of calls. Like they rather would love to talk to more like engaging conversations. That is what we are seeing a lot in the B2B shift. And our goal is to make sure like we cut down the bulk of like unnecessary things and then get the user to talk to meaty stuff when we start engaging.
Got it. One more thing which it's pretty interesting when you mentioned, I mean, we were also talking to in the same podcast with another founder, Shruti Kapoor of Wingman. And Wingman has also had that huge crazy growth during the COVID. And it was also, she was also talking about like suddenly, while recording sales calls wasn't a thing before COVID, but after COVID, this became a necessity. And there were multiple companies, and they then eventually integrated with Clary, and now they are part of Clary and other this thing. And that's one trend, but you have to also define the trend and how you want to do it. But one thing which is more of a doubt or other this thing is like, does having lot of competitors in a similar field or lot of companies coming suddenly into this thing, does it really help your growth, or does it make the product or the segment more competitive? Because there is a difference between kind of like something which is a current trend where suddenly everyone jumps into a certain this thing versus
Mm.
lot of companies being able to do well in the same segment. Like CRM is one segment, there are multiple winners there. Similarly,
Yeah.
marketing automation, similarly, there are even Chorus plus Wingman
Yeah.
plus Gong and others. There may be some bigger and some smaller, but how do you see that having multiple winners or multiple?
Sure. I think the market is pretty big in this one. And
Yeah.
in terms of one is like this is something that is constantly increasing and growing. So I see easily there is a multiple winners in this space. Like, and I think it's not just enterprise, even mid-market or even startups starting to see a value on these ones. Like how do we best demonstrate the product? A lot of them start thinking about enterprise only, but now we're seeing like mid-market, even startups. Like we literally went to more a PLG style. People can sign up and put the demos out. So we're seeing a huge uptick even in startups. So point is like the market is pretty big and it's constantly expanding with the SaaS. So there will always be multiple winners. And the other part, even though the other players exist in this space, and I think it's most important is how do you take a one product line, what you build in terms of demonstration, and how do you grow into adjacent areas pretty quickly and understand how you increase your account value itself, right? Increase and expand into it. That is very important. So if you start thinking like this is the only way I want to build these things, but you can start looking at the whole buyer journey. And what I was outlining is it starts from marketing, sales, and sales also have different touch points. What's the best way to demonstrate the product? So the key here is to build multiple product lines, start building a platform play so that you are connecting marketing, sales, onboarding teams, everybody in one place, all about demos, right? The best way to do it. So there is one way where people build a guided version, then you start thinking about a live version, then you start depending upon like sandbox kind of a version. So you start building out the best way they can put their product out there for different use cases. So the way we see it is like it is always going to be like how we start GTM around this area, but then expanding quickly with different product areas lines so that we're able to acquire and expand into it. So if you don't have that, I mean, this again comes from what we've built before, is like then you're going to get stagnated either through like multiple players being there and you're depending on the market to expand only. So you just don't want the market to expand. You want multiple levers working through you. One is market expansion. One is how you will expand your product lines. Very important. So you can acquire more as well.
Oh, that's an amazing insight, because generally from a VC or even a first time, you just look at it as a market being very large and I'm building in it and I'll capture as much in part of the product. But this is something where like, yes, market is not always going to grow, but your product lines can grow and expand into newer markets or more adjacent areas and then expand your overall kind of revenue value, which you can trigger from the same set of customers or even increase your ACV and other things. That's an interesting viewpoint.
I love, sorry, just to add there, one thing is, I love the example I would say is like, you should think of like Pendo. Pendo, I mean, you've heard Pendo. Pendo is a great product onboarding,
Product
and
analytics.
they were late into the market a little bit. Not the first always, but they were a little late. But how they expanded the product portfolio and lines is very critical. How they expanded. It's not about like acquiring. Market is there with a lot of product onboarding exists today. There is, but how you expand and acquire is important. It's not just the market expansion; it goes into product expansion. Very important.
No, that's interesting, because interesting that you mentioned about Pendo also, because there is Mixpanel, Amplitude, Heap Analytics, and then Pendo from a product analytics perspective, how they this thing. In the other part, in terms of product onboarding, there are big guys like Whatfix and multiple other companies as well. And they are able to still expand into both sides. And I think Whatfix will also expand here and these guys will also expand, but increasing the average ACV.
And they also do feedback, NPS, everything, right? So you can think about like how they're expanding to the product lines.
How they're expanding to the product. That's a pretty amazing insight in terms of like how you see your journey as an entrepreneur, rather than just the initial first couple of years, but more from a long-term perspective, how you're building it in this thing. Right. Coming to the one other aspect about Storylane's impact, or generally the demo on the website impact. What happens to a company pre and post Storylane? I mean, pre, if this is your conversion funnel, this is what happens. After I install Storylane, what is the impact? How much does the conversions impact? How does the sales acceleration impact? What is the customer seeing on ROI for him to actually take it up?
So I'll talk about like on from the time a prospect is coming to your website to research and learn about you, right? So the most common use case of Storylane is people putting the demos on the website, and then at top of the funnel, when somebody visits your website, you want to engage with them. So I think it's critical to look at it from what your website product is, and not like look at one number that fits for everybody, right? If your product already has a self-serve motion, what are you trying to get out of it, right? Is it more signups, more booking, talking to my salespeople or product specialists, or taking them to a different page like a pricing page, or converting them? So understand where you want to convert, and that being the goal. So we have seen customers where like all they wanted to do was like show an ungated version. When I say ungated, like they don't want to capture it, they want to show what the product is, and they want to drive them to a case study, or they want to drive them to a pricing page. That's all they wanted to do. And you will see like it's a low ask from a person, and you will see a 3x easily conversion there, right? For example. And if you start looking for like, hey, you need to give me an email before you can see something, right? That's totally fine, depending on your complexity of the product. And again, that's why I say it depends on your goals and the products and everything. Then you will see less people showing because it's gated. But if your product has a lot of those challenges as a company, as a platform that you're building, then it's totally fine to do it. And you will see easily a 20-25% uptick in your lead pipeline that comes through it. So again, so these are like, again, if you're selling to enterprise, mid-market, startup, depends on who your audience are and what you're optimizing for. So what we generally see is like either it's a clicks on a CTA to go to a booking page or pricing page, we see 2 to 3x easily coming and leading into it. Or if it's a conversion where you want a real lead attribution coming through it, we see 20-25% increasing there as well. So that's basically how you start thinking about it. Simply put it in 2 ways. And depending on complex product, how you gate it, whether it's beginning, whether it's late in your product demos, or what type of conversions you're looking for. So that's something that we work with the companies when they come on board. We optimize to think the best practices, what we have done with 500 plus customers, what they're doing, and some of the learnings from them. So we try to, mention that through our specialist team, saying that this is the best thing. So we're kind of educating them as well during the journey.
Got it. No, that's pretty good in terms of like if it is general only ungated one, the increase in the pricing page or people visiting the pricing page or a demo page or after pages like goes to up by 2 to 3x. But on the other hand, if it is just plain gated, number of overall demos which you get is 20-25%. Which model works for which kind of companies? Is it the former or is it the latter? Or what is the pattern? Any patterns do we see here?
The patterns I would say is like if you are like if you have a PLG motion already, right? PLG motion company, like number one is like if you already have a product that you can allow people to sign up, then we recommend not to gate your product, right? Because people can put the same information and sign up and see your actual
Sign up and
product.
sign.
So definitely no on that. And then so basically like have a ungated version. The reason why people are not signing up for a product is there's a lot of companies and a lot of startups offer similar, and they don't want to sign up for everybody, but rather they want to see something, and if it's valuable, then they would love to sign up. So your intent is to take them to a sign up page or a pricing page or something there. Definitely the model works. And if you have an enterprise and then where you have like a large account value deals and where it's not like everybody, you have low lead pipeline, I recommend doing a lead forms there and try A/B testing with lead forms in the beginning or in the later in the stages, so that you will be able to see a quick data point value, because people need to go through many hoops to even see your product. Now, if you show them very early in your website with a lead, they will be willing to provide their contact information quickly to see that. It's like how we've done with traditionally people have done with ebooks, downloads, and everything, right? And in terms of
Got it.
learning, so now they're able to actually more willing to provide you a contact and lead information to see more product rather than like download an ebook, right?
Just
That's
download
what
an
we see.
ebook or a
Yeah,
newsletter which mostly ends up in promotional spam and this thing. So the demo of the product is a lot more kind of
right,
like a low friction for people to sign up or see something rather than the thing. So
right.
that's
And
something which
and the other thing is like you know that these people are definitely very high intent. That is the number one thing. Then compared to a newsletter or a book or anything that happens on your website, you know that they are not that, because a lot of visitors you get. And how do you identify the high intent ones? And from that, the high intent ones are anybody engaging in your product or viewing your product or coming multiple times to view your product again. And so all that are great signs in terms of understanding like the intent from that particular company or from that particular lead itself, right? So those are great factors that actually you'll be able to get notification right away, and then now you are able to engage with them quickly more. That's basically the driving factor.
No, that's amazing actually, because I have seen that, I mean, newsletters and ebook content is more from an educative
Yeah,
point. It's not really hand raising something like I want to do. But on the other hand, when people actually check out the whole demo of the product and work, of course, there can be competitors who do it, but most other people who actually do it is possible prospects. And
yes.
that also gives me an idea where like we work on the account identification space, like
Yeah,
how we identify who are the anonymous accounts which come to your website. If there are 100 companies which are visiting your website, a couple of them sign up, but remaining others are anonymous. We reveal the account level, not the user level, but the account level information to show what it is. But and we actually pride yourself, like people who come to your pricing page or your demo page, etc., or your contact us page are all like high intent, which should be there. But adding that other element, like people who actually see your demo and identifying
yeah,
which accounts, is also something which makes sense. Time what they do after that and mapping their buyer journey also has a lot more sense. That's
absolutely.
another idea which I get. That's great. And that's about the product which we know and other thing. But one more thing which I just wanted to ask you about is like, I mean, 2021 you were in YC.
Yeah,
2023 you are at 500 customers. In YC you didn't even have even customers at the end of YC, which is there. What
yeah.
happened in between in 2 years?
No, it's been a great, crazy, fun ride with we're building a lot of things and good set of customer base that we've been growing through it. So what happened in the last 1.5 years, I would say, is basically like the initial part of the our growth had been like more like we talked to a lot of customers every day. We talked to a lot of them and prospects, and then it's been growing through. One of the main driving factors, we always wanted to be a fully PLG company, and it's not about like it was more about like when we will be a PLG company rather than like not. It's not like if we'll ever be a PLG company ourselves. So we launched a PLG version of our product early this year. So last year, I mean, it's not. I would recommend companies, again. There's another thing is like just don't be, PLG means just don't open a sign up, and that's not a PLG, right? PLG doesn't just mean that because that, right? And you need to know how to capture the data, understand the data, and how best to provide value. So it's good amount of product development, engineering, UX, experience, and everything, how you build that experience. So we spent a good amount of time. I mean, when we launched 2021 YC, we knew we have to be a peer. We had to be PLG. So we spent a lot of time last year building a lot of the product scopes. And what happens is what we have seen in the market is like people want, again, PLG, low friction, getting the value prop really quickly of what your product demos will do. And also we wanted to test out how we can upsell them or expand into this, right? It's very important. And one is to, it's very hard to get PhD done right, and that definitely helped us. And after spending good amount of time in 2022, and we launched this very earlier, and that caused a lot of increase in terms of people coming in, signing up, subscribing, or we're able to upsell to them pretty quickly. We are nowhere done with PLG. It's a ongoing evolving process always, right? And traditional PLG talks about like how you acquire users, retain them, how do you expand them, right?
Mhm.
And you really need to make sure like product sells by itself, but at the same time have the right hooks so that they are able to expand that also. Since we're very early at the stage as well in the PLG motion, we're learning through it, but that's definitely helped us an uptick, what we've seen for sure.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, almost even now we are seeing even large enterprises or companies which used to sell 50K, 60K ACV products also coming into the PLG. We saw Meta data coming into like they sell 50, 60K product. They're trying to do it. We have seen, of course, Six Sense from Slintel and others. They're also trying a PLG motion. Almost every company, though the traditional ones like Loom is there or Canva, Figma, and others are there. This thing. Any frameworks you can talk about? Because most startups would also think, how are the hooks? What are the things which you shouldn't do? What are the things which you, I mean, there is no generic thing, but some things which from your experience where like you are learning on the hooks and how do you actually convert?
Yeah, I think I'll give you an example of what I like. Actually, a couple of things, right? So I think a lot of influencers and people talk about like, hey, you have to be PLG. Like they don't understand like when you build a product, it's not that easy to be PLG for any product, right? So what I think the framework is two types, right? If you build products like Loom or even some of them simpler products where the learning curve is fast and seeing a value quickly in the first 2 minutes easy. When you build a more complex products, right, and enterprises or anybody, then seeing the value prop takes time because you might have to integrate with multiple things. You have a lot of frictional points. What I liked in those cases is I really like to see PLG more like not just like showing the main value of your product always. It can also be driven through like kind of think of a catalyst that drives your main product, right? So like good, I would say example is a great example I would think is Clearbit. Clearbit is a good example. The reason is, I mean, when they started out with it, they had a PLG model, but it's still not like you can see everything, but they give you the free accounts, 10, 15 free accounts for free, right? It's not really money making, but that's still a catalyst for people to sign up to see what that will look like before they start talking to people and figuring out the API integration. So think of every product complex, find out a small part of it that you can break it down and provide to customer quickly of value. And that might eventually drive bigger value for you. So if you start thinking in that framework, rather than like, hey, how do I make my entire product a
My
PLG?
product
It's just,
appears.
it's not going, you can't solve it and you are going to struggle throughout the journey. And what we have done within Storylane also is that when we started, we know the whole demo and everything. How do we make it PLG? Like we started breaking it down, the quick value that they can see instantly as they click around the product to build it. That's the first part of the PLG. Now to build more interactivity, more experiences, then they can upgrade or get it right. So show value, they see like, okay, there is a value in this product. I need to spend more time. Now you're showing other things to them, right? And that's the framework I would recommend a lot of times when startups are thinking about it as well. Like not like whatever I build, I'm turning into PLG, but start breaking it down and
Bringing
build a
down to
small piece.
something which is of immediate quick value, which
Yeah.
is there, and that's the part which can be a PLG rather than the product
Yes.
being a PLG or a
Yeah.
PLG motion or something like that, which comes.
Unless you have a product that can entire product can be PLG, like a Loom maybe, right? And then if, it's not like everybody is Loom, right? And
It's
products are
not a.
complex. So when you start thinking about that, then you need to break it down. And I think that's where the most of the time being spent should be. How do I start? And is this even valuable, right? Should I break it down this way or the other way? How do I slice it? That's important.
That's right. So that's amazing in terms of how you look at 500 move to 500 plus companies, your own PLG model and PLG framework. In some sense, what you do, you would have seen at least 500 demos, right, Nalin?
I would have
500
seen. Oh yeah,
if there
yeah.
are 500 customers, you would have seen at least 500 demos
Yes, and I
or
think
500 demos of other companies rather.
yes, we have seen demos. I mean, not all of them are marketing, like use case being demos in the website, but some you as we go after marketing and sales. Some of them use it even in the onboarding. So once you're a PLG, right? So we are learning how people are using it in different ways. To be honest, at that time.
Nice.
So I know we position marketing, but some of them have used it for teaching, training, and the best example I heard how they're using it is in one of the hospitals, medical. They're training someone within the medical. We never thought about it, right? When we started going. So PLG opens up areas where we've never seen it. I mean, this is like, we just found out like, why did the hospital or a school sign up and they're teaching this and hospital training. And this was a fantastic use case. What I heard about it was they want to teach about tobacco, right? How injurious it is for you and you shouldn't. As a medical professional, they want to. There is no easy way for them to educate people, and they're using a demonstration of what they're building and how it will look like, and for them to have more engaging experience by clicking through it and understanding about it. Very simple, but I found it to be very, very valuable using Storylane to build those kind of experiences. So these are things that we have never discovered. So I mean, when we talk about like 100 demos, we are also talking about like different use cases that we never seen also being used actually as well. Yeah.
Do I see an extension into that kind of product onboarding or like education also for the product beyond just a demo kind of a product and other thing?
I'm surprised that we get like at least multiple times a week about like using this in onboarding, and we've been letting people use this in onboarding because what I hear from them is like the current onboarding tools that are out there, right? There are a few. It's in context of product, hard to maintain, and the product is evolving, and they find it to be like people have got used to it and they just don't want it, right? They hate it. So they want like more like on demand. Whenever I want to learn about something, I want to click about something in the product and it'll show me how to do these things. So otherwise I don't want it. So they kind of want something that will launch for me. So they see Storyline being used that way a lot. And interestingly, we are seeing that quite a lot recently as well. It's not something that we go after. Again, this is another use case that we're seeing that being used in product. How do we educate someone when they get stuck with something? They search for something, here it is, I don't know how to do this, how do I find the billing information? Right away it pops up a demo showing the billing information, how to go through it. So that's in context within product people are starting to use as well. Again, the good about PLG is like you will also see like how people are starting to use it. And yes, there is noise around it. I mean, it's pros and cons with that. So how do you control? That's why having some kind of gates within your product to understand the levers so you can upgrade, expand is very important when you're growing.
So I just come to the last couple of questions, but since you have seen so much of SaaS industry, YC, and also so many 500 plus demos, what are the trends you are seeing in the next couple of years within SaaS?
Within
Any
SaaS,
trends which you can comment on, which the thing?
I think definitely, companies being PLG is one trend, right? There's top of my mind is that always. And then companies, I mean, you said, right, metadata and all the companies coming to PLG. And I think that they're seeing the B2B buying is changing a lot and they want to show the product. That's a trend that we're seeing. And it's evident from some of the data from like G2 Trust Radius who have published these articles of buyer research, how many times they want to see the product. It's very evident there. And most of the companies just want to show it, right? And that's a trend that's happening a lot now, be it in the marketing or on the sales side.
Show, not talk, kind of the thing.
Sure, and that's number one. Number two, I think the trend I see is like more verticalization of SaaS definitely happening, and in the sense like this didn't happen 4 5 years back, but definitely a lot more. When I say verticalization of SaaS, it's like you can see like tools SaaS specifically made for like barber shops or like gyms, right? There's a verticalization, including billing, invoicing, and everything. That's a lot happening now.
And
And
I
we probably
recently
should learn
saw a
as well.
SaaS product made for astrologers.
Yep, exactly. So that is going to continue to happen. And one thing I see in the verticalization is that's great, and for this for the market and speed, that's going to happen. The other thing I also see is like within for when you sell to businesses B2B, and earlier they used to have like tools for product team, marketing team, onboarding team, different tools. Now every company, every SaaS company will have to. I mean, it's a great way to get in, right? To get into one particular thing because they talk about like, hey, good, have a GTM, very clear ICP, go into it. That's a great way to get in. Yes, to solving a problem. But then there's so much SaaS tools being there, then they want to consolidate. There's a proliferation of SaaS that's happening. So companies like Pendo, I quoted an example, expanding to other product lines is also going to start happening more because they want to see sales teams, marketing teams, product teams, because the notion of PLG means like more teams within a company needs to be aligned more. That happens when they start using common tools, not disparate tools. So then all the tools that they use will start talking to each other a lot more better than before. Or every company will start expanding into product lines that serves every other areas. So that's another thing that will happen in the
That's
next 5 to 2 years. Yeah.
nice. That's interesting. A couple of more questions, but one thing which I want to know: you are a SaaS user. I mean, apart from Storylane, which other kind of products you use for your own go-to-market, and how do you work on that?
I
Any
mean, yeah, Spot, Intercom, all these are the tools that we use as a startup as we are growing into it. And again, these are the tools that we use a lot. And Spot, Intercom, and a bunch of tools. I mean, we purchase tools every other few weeks now, actually, in terms of anything that helps us pain
sell
point for
better?
sure, sell better, and definitely. And those are the tools that we use. Of course, we use our own tool, and then videos for Loom and things like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Any interesting tools? Any new tools which you found interesting in the last couple of months or weeks or something?
Any interesting tool? I mean, there's a lot of AI tools that's been coming. I've been playing around with them for sure. And then I haven't found anything like spent so much time in the last 1 or 2 months. I think we've been more like a traditional tools that have been tried and tested at this point, been using it. But no, nothing comes to my mind in terms of the new ones AI, which is very interesting that we started purchasing and using it.
Got it.
We bought a lot of tools around like AI, blog generation, things like that when there was a hype around it. But we haven't stuck with it, any of them. So we've tried few of the tools, but we
That's
haven't gone to the next stage. Yeah.
That's great. And I would be damned if I don't ask this, but most importantly, I'm more interested in your answer given that you have been an ML engineer, computer vision, and others. What is the AI vision around Storyline or as a product person yourself?
No, great point. So one thing is
Mhm.
tech is something that's deeply inside, so it always comes out. And I think we have made some AI updates, like assistant updates within the demos itself. One of the common things that I always believe, like it should be really helpful right away, right? When you build an AI, just
Mhm.
not for the name of AI to add to it, right? Which is happening a lot. So what we been hearing is like these demos being translating to different languages automatically, and like we just recently released around like translation of these demos and the guides that people are watching and everything in a quick way, or adding the voiceovers, right, to give more context to these demos. That's something that we've added recently within Storylane as well, because when people are watching seeing the demos, and if somebody wants to hear more about that information, so and the challenge was around like how do we create more context to it. So we recently released around AI assist tools on these as well. But the way I see it in the long form is like we see like these demos being automatically being built based on some of the data that you have generated so far, and that's how we see it. And when I say automatically be built, the users being able to ask the right questions and being able to have a more personalized demos. That's very critical, because that becomes more like your product is auto updating and through AI. So that's how we see it in the long game, and then you'll see some updates next year. Yeah. We'll
That's
provide.
great. I mean, lastly, coming out without any of the technical questions, as an entrepreneur or as a person, any good movie recommendations or book recommendations for SaaS founders or operators?
I think I'm not a big movie person. I mean, little less on that, very less on movies or TV shows. I mean, if kids watch it. I just watch with them now. In terms of books, right, I would recommend one thing strikes out is that, and definitely I love the book about from Ben Horowitz, The Hard Things About Hard Things. I highly recommend anybody who's an entrepreneur to read it. And I don't read too many or anything like that, but I think this one it just stuck with me. For some reason, I read it. I liked it. I mean, one is because being an entrepreneur, you can resonate to a lot to it. And if any tech founder doesn't have to be an entrepreneur, tech founder, I think it's definitely a great one, and it's pretty popular, and I like that a lot. Yeah.
Got it. No, that's great. Thanks a lot for the I mean, a lot of wisdom around both YC, YYC, multiple time entrepreneurship, go to market, trends within SaaS, and also your thoughts on AI and how you build the product around the PLG framework, etc. And this has been amazing. And as a person, I've been also taking notes as we speak. So it's really, really thanks and much obliged for your time here. Thanks a lot, Nalin.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. And yeah, thanks again.
Sure. I'll just.
All right.